Happy All Saints Day, everybody, and Tony here with a review of the psychological horror anime classic Perfect Blue, which was released in Japan in 1997 and was released 2 years later in the USA and the UK by Manga Entertainment. This was based on Yoshikazu Takeuchi's novel Perfect Blue, Complete Metamorphosis. It was directed by Satoshi Kon, in which in turn was his directorial debut. It was produced by Hitomi Nagakaki, Yoshihisa Ishihara, Yutaka Togo, Masao Maruyama, and Hiroaki Inoue. The screenwriter was Sadayuki Murai. The cinematographer was Hisao Shirai. It was edited by Harutoshi Ogata. The music was composed by Masahiro Ikumi. The production company in charge of the animation was Madhouse, and it starred the voices of, on the Japanese side, Junko Iwao, Rika Matsumoto, Shinpachi Tsuji, and Masaaki Okura. And on the English side, we have Bridget Hoffman, Wendy Lee, Barry Stigler, and Robert Martin Klein. I mainly came across this anime film through complete chance, and I mostly heard a lot of amazing things about it, whether I read blogs or watch video reviews talking about Perfect Blue, or even hear about it from some really good friends. On top of that, Perfect Blue is one of the most iconic anime films of all time. Totally up there with the likes of a lot of Studio Ghibli films and of course Akira. So much so that Darren Aronofsky was completely inspired by this film, most notably through his works like Requiem for a Dream and The Black Swan. Speaking of The Black Swan, he stated that Perfect Blue was his main source of inspiration for this particular film starring Natalie Portman. I'll gladly talk about the similarities between The Black Swan and Perfect Blue once I talk about the story starting right now. So the basic plot revolves around Mima Kirigoe, in which she is a member of the all-girl pop idol group Cham alongside her two friends Rei and Yukiko. After one performance, she announced that she is about to retire her gig as one of the group members of Cham so that she can pursue an acting career. Once she has made that decision, she then gets herself involved in a new TV show called Double Bind, in which she then has to do some pretty shocking scenes. In turn, she has this other side to her, her pop idol side, which constantly torments her and almost makes her lose her mind. Thus begins Mima's downward spiral through self-doubt and a lot of really messed up stuff happening to her, especially when it involves a stalker known only as Moneyi. So there's no doubt that Perfect Blue talks about some pretty heavy and psychological stuff, like dissociative personality disorder and a fair amount of depression, and of course, celebrity stalking, especially when we have one of the most fascinating yet really scary monsters to intrigue the screen known as Moneyi. On top of that, as I stated before, this has some similarities to The Black Swan, in which we have both Mima and Nina, who start off as really sweet and really well-meaning and innocent young women, but they want to do something a lot more. With Mima, she wants to try her luck with being an actress, and with Nina, she wants to dance the antagonistic role of the Black Swan. And along the way, they both experience their personalities completely having a clash against each other, so much so that they can't even recognize who the real one really is. And it's a constant psychological clash that these two characters have in their separate installments, which was probably why Darren Aronofsky was so intrigued by Perfect Blue so that he can make his film The Black Swan. There are a lot of psychological elements which are really complex and really interesting and quite fascinating, but more importantly, quite frightening, especially with some topics that feel all too real, and especially when it involves one stalker by the name of Moneyi, and I'll gladly talk about his character much later. So what more can I say about Perfect Blue's story? It's a fine mixture of psychological horror, a murder mystery, and it's just simply put thrilling from beginning to end. And for 81 minutes, I have to say that I was really satisfied. The animation was really well done at the time, even though these days it looks a bit dated, mostly because of the old school anime style feel. It really manages to convey the characters as real people. It doesn't use those over exaggerated expressions. And of course, every detail just comes to life so well. Sure, the style, when one looks back at it, looks a bit crude and looks quite dated, especially by today's standards. But nonetheless, the detail shown in Perfect Blue is just so vivid and so well done, especially the lighting. When one encounters Mima in her pop idol days with Cham, the lighting is quite bright and colorful, and it's quite vivid, especially on the normal days where Mima is just living her life, going grocery shopping, feeding her fish, and is just situated in her apartment. The lighting is quite normal in those moments with Mima just being an everyday normal girl. But once we get to the more thrilling and, dare I say, claustrophobic scenes, that's when the lighting starts to become a lot more garish, harsh, and quite frightening with great effect. When it comes to that scene where Mima's character gets raped, the lighting is really harsh and garish, with a great use of magenta and red violet to really show the overall savagery of that particular scene. And there are some moments in which red is used quite well, probably to show Mima having this type of interpersonal struggle within herself. And of course, it's pretty much the battle that Mima has to face and acknowledge until it's all too late. And the animation overall really does set up the mood that Mima gets herself into, and it does set up the overall atmosphere of Perfect Blue. So I'm not going to mince words here. The animation, especially when it comes to the lighting, was so well done, so vivid, so ideally frightening, and in a word, it's just really well done. The music was really well handled, most specifically in the claustrophobic and even the more frightening scenes. It manages to make a great use of minimalism, and it manages to leave the audience on their edge of their seats. Special mention has to go to Junko Iwao, Emiko Furukawa, and Shiho Niyama for their superb singing of their trademark song, which is sung by Cham, which is quite catchy, and their voices blended very well. Even when Emiko Furukawa and Shiho Niyama were just the only two performing as their characters, it's still a very flawless vocal performance from the both of them. So I'm not going to mince words here about the music. It is very well done, especially when you have the incidental music, which builds up the overall claustrophobic atmosphere superbly. The characters are equally as fascinating as they are disturbing, starting off with Mima Kirigoe. Now, Mima starts off the film as a sweet, innocent, and really loving 21-year-old girl who seems to have a very fine career with the all-girl pop idol group Cham. She lives in an apartment which is quite decent, and of course she seems to live a relatively normal life despite the fact that she is also a pop idol singer and eventually turns into an actress. Throughout the film, she does maintain her rather girlish and innocent image, but once she starts to make the transition from pop idol to actress, we also have another side to her, her pop idol side, that states that Mima might be doing something completely wrong with her life, especially when she gets herself into that taped rape scene, which is a part of the new TV show Double Bind. And once that scene is over and Mima is all by herself, her pop idol self confronts her consistently, thus messing up with her mind, and even Mima herself cannot escape from the stalking clutches of one Moneyi. So the downward spiral from having Mima be a sweet, innocent, and really cute young lady to a woman who is depressed and a woman who is just completely overwhelmed by all the insane happenings going on about her is not only fascinating, but dare I say, completely disturbing, especially considering the fact that Mima is all but 21 years of age, an age where she is at the height of her powers when it comes to her talents, but there's a big part of her that is still quite young to also handle the overall stress of the media, so much so that her manager, Rumi, has to help her with setting up a website and setting up a computer and helping her with all of these type of technological stuff, which also does explain Mima's simple background, even though she had a lot of success as a pop idol singer and of course as an actress. So I'm not going to mince words here. Mima is a pretty fascinating and an awesome character to watch because what we see here is a young woman who starts off rather well, but throughout the film, because of that scene that she got herself into, has started to have her own insanity increase and her own awareness of everything around her decrease, which makes her as a character quite disturbing and at times quite saddening, especially considering the fact that as a young 21-year-old woman who has so much in her life, she not only wants to be seen as another pretty face, but she also wants to be seen as someone who is talented and someone who is ready for anything, which is also why she gets herself into not only an acting career, but also gets herself into nude photo shoots and even some pretty shocking scenes for the sake of being in double bind. Then we go to her manager, Rumi. Rumi is almost like Mima's big sister. They have a sort of big sister, little sister type bond, even though she is also the manager of not just Mima, but also that of Yukiko and Rei, the entirety of Cham. Rumi does feel rather concerned of Mima's decisions of if she ever wants to not only be an actress, but get herself into all of these pretty shocking scenes. And on top of that, Rumi only wants the best from Mima, and she just wants to make sure that she makes some pretty good decisions with her career transition. Tadokoro is pretty supportive of Mima's transition from pop idol to actress. He certainly believes that Mima does have a great amount of potential to be a great actress after her many years as a pop idol singer. He does have a fair amount of concern for Mima and was even a victim of one of Moneyi's attacks, especially when he received an exploding postcard, thus injuring him almost fatally. But nonetheless, he was still rather okay. So it's safe to say that Tadokoro is another person in Mima's professional life that wants the best from her and sees loads of potential in Mima. Then we finally have probably one of the most frightening characters to grace the screen, the one and only Moneyi. What's so fascinating about this particular character, or shall I say creature, is that his design makes him look like he is not of this world. He has this type of abnormality about him with his really crooked teeth and those soulless looking eyes and that messy look that he has. He certainly is someone that looks really intimidating, not only on the outside but also on the inside. He obsesses over Mima to the point where he doesn't see her as a person but as an object to his overall desires and, more appropriately, lust. Characters like him are also quite real, especially what happened to Bjork through her stalker, Ricardo Lopez. Now, for those of you who don't know, Ricardo Lopez was infamously Bjork's stalker. He made a lot of video entries of how he was obsessively in love with Bjork and how he obsessively worships her, to the point where he even looked through a lot of Bjork's personal details and even her relationships because he was obsessively in love with her that he wanted to quote unquote marry her, but when he found out about all that stuff, he wanted to do her in and even do himself in. So he decided to send a briefcase full of sulfuric acid, but once it got sent to Bjork, the police intercepted it and he was going to be arrested. Then Ricardo Lopez did himself in with the sulfuric acid. This has definitely become one of the real life stories that has become really scary and really infamous for how celebrity stalkers can be. And of course, Moneyi managed to encapsulate all those celebrity stalkers with his overall creepy appearance and the fact that he placed himself pretty firmly on Satoshi Kon's rogues gallery because of just how messed up he is as a character and just how disturbingly real this creature truly is. So overall, the characters have something quite fascinating about them, but also something quite disturbing about them, which makes them all the more intriguing from beginning to end. The voice acting in both tracks was superb, but I have to give it to the Japanese voice actors for really selling it. Starting off with Junko Iwao as Mima. I mainly knew Iwao-san in her roles like Tomoyo from Cardcaptor Sakura and a lot of cutesy girl roles. And I have to say that the role of Mima proves to be one of the very few roles in which she was able to do something this mature. She was able to play up Mima's girlishness very well. She made her sweet and innocent and pretty much made her the girl next door from the very beginning, and she was very believable when she had to make Mima suffer and go through all of these psychologically damning moments. She was so believable in her screams, in her cries for help, and everything that she had to accomplish, all thanks to that youthful and light soprano voice which Miss Iwao has been very well known for. And it should be no surprise that Junko Iwao herself is also a singer. So she did a very flawless job with the singing as well, and she definitely proved herself to be a multi-talented voice actress, thus making Mima come alive as a character and thus making the viewer empathize with Mima and everything that she went through throughout the entire film. Bridget Hoffman is slightly more mature sounding as Mima, but I still have to give her a lot of credit for everything she did. She was still a very fine and superb voice actress, thus giving Mima her trademark girlishness, her girl next door attitude in the very first few moments, and eventually some of her psychologically damning moments in the later parts of the film. And even though her delivery, especially in the psychologically damning moments, was a bit forced, I have to say that it was still a very fine package that Miss Hoffman delivered. I still have to give it to Junko Iwao for her very superb performance of Mima, as she was able to make her come alive as a character flawlessly. Both Rika Matsumoto and Wendy Lee did phenomenal jobs as Rumi. Rika Matsumoto, who I mainly knew her in a lot of boyish roles like Ash from the Japanese dub of Pokemon, was quite wonderful as Rumi. Her usual forte is voicing a lot of boys and young kids in general, but to hear her voice a mature woman was quite fascinating. She was able to breathe in a lot of life to Rumi, and her performance was really spot on. The same thing I can say about Wendy Lee. Wendy Lee is certainly someone one can never go wrong with. The fact that she has an extremely wide and versatile range certainly makes her the go-to girl in anything in terms of anime and in terms of anything related to voice acting. She certainly breathed in a lot of life to Rumi, making her quite motherly and making her have that big sister-like attitude towards Mima, and she was able to make her quite professional in some occasions. And it's a very fine job that she did with Rumi, and I have to give her a lot of kudos, not only to her, but to Rika Matsumoto, and both of them just did a very great job with making Rumi come to life as a character. Both Shinpachitsuji and Barry Stigler did fine jobs as Tadokoro. They were able to give him a very professional sounding voice. They were able to make him come alive as a character, and they just made him quite fascinating. I could definitely give high marks to both Masaki Okura and Robert Martin Klein for bringing in their high-pitched tenor voices to great use to make Me Mania the very twisted and psychopathic monster that he is. They were able to make Me Mania just so twisted, so inhumane, and so frightening that there were times that I was on the edge of my seat every time I heard their voices giving life to such an unpleasant character like Me Mania. We also had such amazing vocal talents from, on the Japanese side, Yosuke Akimoto, Yokushioya, Hideyuki Hori, Masashi Ebara, Toshio Furukawa, Kiyoyuki Yanada, Emi Shinohara, Akio Suyama, Emiko Furukawa, and of course, the late, great Shiho Niyama. And on the English side, we have Steve Boulin, Stephen Apostolina, Kirk Thornton, Leah Sargent, Jameson Price, Diane DeRosario, and Mary Elizabeth McGlynn. So overall, the voice acting in both tracks was superb. But I have to give it to the Japanese track for making their performances so believable, and simply put, hiring a lot of great veterans like Junko Iwao to do such amazing jobs. So overall, Perfect Blue is a definite classic. Whether you are a huge fan of Satoshi Kon and his works, or whether you are a huge anime fan in general, you owe it to yourself to view this particular psychological horror anime classic. And you know what I'm going to give this film. A well-deserved 5 out of 5 stars. It is an absolute classic. It is a must-watch. And you all owe it to yourselves to view this particular Satoshi Kon classic. And for those of you who watched Perfect Blue, what'd you think of it? Did you really love this particular classic film? Did you feel like there was a moment that stood out to you so much? Or was there something that just didn't really hold up? Comment below and let me know. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for my review of the underrated British-Canadian cartoon show, It's the Mr. Hell Show. So until then, good night everybody, and happy All Saints Day.